I was born in Hungary, in a small town. My father was born in the same town. It's called Megyasszó. I grew up in a very peaceful town. Like I said, I attended a Catholic school, and everybody got along well. You know, my father had a store, and we knew everybody, and everybody knew us. It was peaceful, never had any problem. You know what my favorite time was? Christmas time. You know why? Because my father would bring in toys, and I loved dolls, and he would always let me pick it out. Really wonderful, and have good friends, and visited, you know, we kept the Sabbath, and we visited our friends. It was wonderful. In a small town, we didn't have movies, so we visited. Like on a Saturday, on a Sabbath, you know, people would come to us, or we went to them, and we got together, went for a walk, you know. And I tell you, I love to read, and we didn't even have a library, but not far from there, where my mom came from, was a city, and I had friends there, and she would take out books for me. I love to read. You know, where I would ride my bicycle. It took an hour for the bicycle. That city was famous from a chocolate and candy factory. But my daughter and my son-in-law went back last summer, and they said no more. They just, I think Nestle is boarded up, it only makes sugar. But it was beautiful because you were safe to go on the highway with the bicycle. You didn't have any problem. You didn't have to be afraid. Except I was afraid of dogs, but I avoided dogs. But otherwise, we had a really peaceful, good life. I remember reading a book about what happened in Poland. You know, this was Passover, you know, and it was interesting how they were already having problems. And I was really surprised that they already had problems, the Jewish people, you know. Like I said, I loved all kinds of books. I still do. My father had a store. You know, it was like a miniature apartment store. We had grocery, and we had some ready-made clothes, like shoes, you know, sneakers. You know who wore sneakers? Only old people, one of those old-style sneakers. And the mostly textile, fabrics, all kind of fabrics. And you wanted a dress, you took the fabric. We used to get the fashion magazine from friends, and you picked out a style, and they told you what kind of a fabric, and they had beautiful dressmakers, and they fit you very good. And I loved clothes. What you call over here is a course was I would have loved every Shabbos a new dress. Only my father would say, don't make it too short, and I liked it short. I had a friend that knew how to sew. I smuggled the dress there, and she had me short. Like I said, it was such a wonderful, if you read about small towns sometimes here in America, how people know each other, everybody help each other, you know. And I'm going to tell you, when there was a time, I'm trying to think, I think 1943, when the young man was taken in for slave labor, all the Jewish young men. And my mom was always worried about everybody. I think she was like a Red Cross and Salvation Army rolled into one. She made sure that those young families, you know, had everything what they needed. And when you're young, you're surprised, why is she like that? But I think as I got older, you know, I enjoyed my husband even used to tell me, you happy twice when you buy something, when you give it away. We had 16 Jewish families, but we lived like here, not in a ghetto, like, you know, different between everybody, between, you know, neighbors, and we got along with everybody. We observed Sabbath and kosher. I even did in my home after the war. But I like to read and, you know, play hotchkop, how do you call it, and balls, and my father used to go away, get merchandise, and he would bring us balloons. It wasn't that you could get just anywhere, you know. And you know what else? Yo-yo. We had that. And then we played domino and chess. But I don't think I would remember because the names, those very different. The school was very, very good. It's interesting because we attended a Catholic school, and, you know, while we were there, they were teaching them about Jesus. Well, I never heard from them that Jesus was Jewish. But sometimes the teacher called us on us to, so he would say, see, they don't have to know, and they know, but when you sit there and you listen to it, you know, you remember. Yes. And the Last Supper was a Seder. And they never talked about it. We respected each other. We never had any problem. Never. Never. It was amazing when I hear all the things that happened in other countries. Never had any problem with anybody. We were good friends with everybody, you know. While I'm in school, I was friendly with everybody. But after school, 3 o'clock, it was finished, and we went to our synagogue. We had a Hebrew teacher, and we learned how to daven. I know very well, but I don't understand what I'm saying. So, you know, I have a Chumash, and I read every Friday night. I read it in English. But it's the same story. I like to eat, so I love the kitchen. We didn't have electric ovens, you know. You had to make a fire, you know. And, you know, we had already very pretty, these ovens, you know. There is an area where you put water and it heated up. You know, they were pretty in the kitchen, you know. It was very nice. But, you know, for the dishes, it was amazing. For Shabbos, we had, like here you have for books, the shelves. For the fleischige pots and pans. And every Friday we would change the shelf, you know, fabric, you know, we used to embroider it. Just for Shabbos, a different one. My favorite, you know what Holomoid is? Like Passover, 2 days Yontev, and then you could travel. Holomoid, Passover, and Holomoid, Sukkot, we would hire a carriage and we would go to visit my grandma, and all the other relatives would come, and that was my favorite time. Well, you know, the cousins that we didn't see each other a long time, you know, so we just talked. And my grandfather was a rabbi, but I didn't know my grandfather because my mom was the youngest of 8 children and she didn't even remember her father. But my grandmother was alive, and they still called her the old Rebbetzin. You know what that is? Yeah, so we were known there, and the Rebbetzins' grandchildren. You know, a rabbi's wife called the Rebbetzin. So everybody knew us, we are the Rebbetzins' grandchildren. Family was, after the war especially, very, very close, you know, and all of us that survived. Unfortunately, I had an older sister and a younger brother, but people that I was in Auschwitz with, and after we were survived, you know, we kept very close. It's almost like families, all of us. I don't know if you remember Elie Wiesel saying we have our own language, you know. And we kept, unfortunately, they all passed away because I was probably the youngest, you know. I have 3 cousins in Israel, and one is 100, one is 91, and one is my age. She survived in Budapest, and one went to Palestine before the war. But was interesting, she came back. I can't remember the year, must have been like 1942, and she said, you better leave Europe, it's going to be big problems. But we didn't believe it. But you know, a lot of single people really left countries. I remember one Friday night my father came home from the synagogue and he said there is 2 young men from Poland, they escaped from Poland, and they were saying how they made people dig their own grave. You know, it's a terrible thing, but nobody heard about Auschwitz. Nobody knew about that, you know. My father was in America. He came to America in 1910. He went to medical school in New York. He had 2 older sisters and an older brother. And when they find out that my grandma was sick, he was single, so he went back for a visit, and he couldn't come back because in 1914, World War I broke out, and he had to go into the army. He was a medic. But I heard about America. I loved to listen to him when he talked about America. And then he was telling, he was captured by the Russians, and he was in Siberia, and he said that it was so cold that the wounded soldiers that couldn't move around froze to death. But after the war, they exchanged prisoners, so he came back. Not until our first thing happened in 1942. My father wanted to make the business larger, you know. There was a house for sale, and he went to the mayor's office because there was a new law. If a Jewish person wanted to buy any property or a home, if nobody else wanted that, he could. And he went to the mayor's office and he told them which house he would like to buy. And the mayor said, you shouldn't have any problem, but he asked my father for a certain amount of money. And we moved into the house. The store was in the front and our living quarters in the back. And we didn't even live there for a year when we got a registered letter we have to move out because somebody wants it. That was the first time we encountered anti-Semitism, prejudice against us. And we moved away, we rented a house and we moved away, and things was still very quiet. But in 1943, my father was called into the army, and in uniform, But after 6 months, they sent him home because he was considered too old. He was 52 that time, because all the younger men I mentioned that they were taken in for slave labor. So he came back, and things was still quiet. I know my cousins were in slave labor, and my mom used to send them packages because these two cousins, the parents came to America. My uncle was a rabbi between 1938 and 1940. And then the first time in 1944, April, just before Passover, we got a new law that all the Jewish people have to wear the yellow star. We wore the yellow star, but as far as the town, nobody did anything to us, really, to hurt us or really. And I wasn't afraid. The first time I went out with the star on me was Passover, Yontev. I went to visit a friend. She fell and she had a cast on her legs. It was very interesting. While I was visiting her, her mother said, I don't know how we're going to run with Amy with a cast on her legs. I couldn't understand why she said that. So when I went home, I asked my parents, and my parents said, they don't know. But I think my parents knew something was going to happen, and they, you didn't have a television. We did have a radio. You wouldn't really like to listen to the radio. But my father knew more because he spoke English, and during the night he would listen to the radio from England. So he probably knew more. But like I said, we never thought that where we lived that anything bad going to happen. After, when we started to buy, wear the Jewish star, that was Passover, And like I mentioned, we always went to visit my grandmother, and I asked my parents if we're not going to go. Because we usually talked about it, getting ready. And my parents said, we're not going this year. I cannot explain to you, but I was so determined. I said to them, I'm going to go with the bicycle. Not only my grandmother, but I had this young cousin, had 4 little children. The oldest was 8. Her husband was a rabbi, and he was already taken away. And I went with my bicycle. This was April 1944. And before I came to the city, there was a highway. And the first time I saw the Nazis invading Hungary, motorcycles and jeeps. And when they passed by, I went to visit my grandma, and I saw them, my cousins with the children, and that was the last time I saw them. Our president was Nicholas Horthy, and he was resisting Hitler. He had a son married, and the SS kidnapped him and murdered him, and Horthy was under house arrest, and that's when they called the Aerocruz, the evil government took over Hungary, and that's everything started to change. We finished our holidays, and we don't eat bread for 8 days, and the first day right after the holiday, we got a messenger from the mayor's office that all the Jewish people have to be by our synagogue at nightfall, and each of us could carry not too much. And I remember my mom said to my sister and I, my father was in the synagogue with my brother, and she said, I better go to see Mrs. Fritz. She has all these young children, and I want to make sure they have enough shoes and clothes. And she went into the store. We didn't have those plastic shopping bags. Everybody had a basket. And she filled up the basket with things for the children. And my sister and I said, Mom, we have to get ready. So she said, girls, what to take, comfortable shoes and clothes. And by nightfall, we were all in the synagogue. And my mom had on this gold watch, and my father took it off and put it into one of these hanging chandeliers in the synagogue. And he told each of us, if any of you come back, wear that valuable watches. And, because we didn't have bread and we didn't really eat anything, I guess we were too upset. And our neighbors were very nice. They bought us some milk and bread, we kosher, but you're allowed to have that, And we spent the night there. And the next morning, they have carriages for every family to take us away from there. And there was this clergyman. He was a Protestant clergyman. And, he was a very good friend of my parent. He had a brother in America, and he spoke very good English. And they enjoyed coming to my home and my father and him speaking English. And he came that morning and shook hands with all of us and wished us good luck. And the carriages took us to the train station and from there to the ghetto. You know what a ghetto is. The city just a couple of streets where all the Jewish people stayed. And my family of 5 of us was put into this 1-bedroom apartment owned by a young couple and another couple with a son, and the couple's her parents with a sister. And we, of course, didn't have a bed to sleep on. We just slept on some blankets on the floor. And we were there for about 2 weeks. Then they made the ghetto smaller, so this time we were sleeping in an attic on some straw. It was near the train station, so it's hard to sleep because all night the train was whistling. And we were there for about 2 weeks. And they told us we're going to leave the ghetto. And this was early June. I don't know if you know the Jewish holiday. We got to Auschwitz a day before Shavuot. You know what holiday is that in the summer? After they told us we're going to leave the ghetto, and they took us to the train station, and there were these empty cattle wagons. I can't remember how many of us they pushed in there. You couldn't really sit, you just standing. And they gave us a bucket, use it as a bathroom. And of course, children were crying and old people were very uncomfortable. I can't remember how long the train was going when finally it stopped. And it was still very dark outside. When the doors opened, you see these young men with striped uniform. They were prisoners from Russia, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia. They were yelling in German, everybody out, and they separated the men from the women. And they were rushing us, so we didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to my father and my brother. And my sister and my mom was walking together, and this couple asked my mother in German how old she was. The second language was German in Hungary. My mother spoke very good German, and my mom was only 42. Until this day, I have no idea why she said 52. And as soon as she said that, he pushed her to the left, and we were trying to ask. He said, "Don't worry, you're going to see her later." And this was called Auschwitz in Poland. But they were marching us in further in the area called Birkenau. And as it was getting lighter, we saw these very high wire fences, and behind it this wooden barracks with brick chimneys. And they were rushing us fast. And we got to this very large building, and they told us to go in. There were 2 girls from, I think both from Czechoslovakia. They spoke a little bit Hungarian. And they told us that we have to take all our clothes off, and there were hooks on the wall, and hang up the clothes, just hold on to your shoes. And when I looked ahead, I saw this couple was shaving off the girl's hair. I couldn't understand. I thought maybe they were dirty. Well, they shaved all our hair off, and then they were done with us. They told us to go outside. And just before we entered the next large building, there was this cement container of this white liquid. And I know they were yelling at something in Hungarian, but I couldn't understand. And this girl, she was about my age, she hit me with a strap, and he pushed my hand down where I was holding the shoe to disinfect the shoe. And we went inside. It was a very large room with shower heads on the ceiling and cold water coming down. Until that time, we were together with the family. Nobody ever cried or complained, We tried to be brave, not only that, but in the ghetto, we always have the mothers, we have young children, we always try to be helpful. But it was just so shocking, that I remember that cold water coming down on my face, and I was crying because I couldn't understand why this was happening. It was like a worst nightmare. And when they shut the water off, we didn't have anything to wipe ourselves with, And you looked at each other, you almost didn't recognize one another without the hair. and they were rushing us to get out fast. And we went into another building. There was a long table with a lot of dresses. No underwear. They told us, put your shoes back on and just take one dress and put it on. And they were taking us into the area where I saw all those barracks. They were numbered, 31 barracks. And they took us into this barrack 18. These two girls that were talking to us from Czechoslovakia, her name was Miri. They called her the blockeltester. And the girl that hit me, her name was Gertie from Czechoslovakia. And when you went inside the barracks, you see these 3 layers of these wooden beds. And I can't remember, it was 8 or 10 on each bed, but 4 or 5 on each side. You couldn't lay on your back, just on your side. And you know, from my hometown, there were 2 other girls my age, my sister 3 years older, and 2 girls about 10 years older. And you know, we always tried to keep together. And every morning we had to go outside. They were counting us. They called it sail appel. And first the blokovas, they called them blokovas, you know, they counted us, and then the SS came to count us. And you know, sometimes the girls stayed in, there was this, I don't know if you've ever seen the washroom and bathroom, long rooms, and the bathroom was this wooden tops with a lot of holes, and the washroom just cold water. Sometimes girls didn't feel good or just for one reason stayed there. We had to stay outside until they find everybody was counted. And when we were outside, they gave us a little black coffee with a piece of bread. And then we went inside the barracks, and lunchtime again, they counted us. But lunchtime they gave us some kind of a soup, you know. But the air had such a terrible odor, you know, this burning flesh. I remember I felt nauseous. And in the beginning, I wasn't that hungry. I couldn't, because they didn't have any spoons. You just had to drink from that bowl and pass it around to everybody. And in the beginning, I couldn't eat that. But you know, later on, when you were hungry enough, you couldn't worry about the taste or the smell. You just had to eat something. And at night again, we went outside, and they were counting us and gave us again a little black coffee and a piece of bread. And next door to us, you could see them through the wire. They called it the chair lager. They were families together. It's interesting because we thought really that families lived together, but their faces looked so strange. It looked like wax, you know. They were skinny, and you know, they looked very strange. But even children were with them. And one night we heard a lot of crying and screaming. You know, we weren't allowed to go out from the barracks. And the next morning, that area was empty. And I don't know if anybody heard about Dr. Mengele. Dr. Mengele was the one that came to select girls for work. And whenever they selected girls, they put numbers on their arms, and they put them over there in that camp until they took them away to work. And you know, my sister was healthy, but always very skinny. I remember my mom used to get upset, ask her to eat a little more. She was always very, very skinny, taller than I was, and I was always heavier. And we were separated many times, but until you were in the same area, they called it sea lager. You know, people change places with each other, and we managed to stay together. But one day my sister said to me, you know, if we'll be separated and if we can get back together again, if it's possible to go with my friends from my hometown, you know. And then again, you know, there were selections, and one day they told us that, you know, we're going to leave this area. And we really thought that they're going to take us together someplace. You know, while we were there, if they asked us to volunteer for work, like go to the kitchen and bring the food and bring the bread, you know, we were so afraid to be separated, my sister and I, so we never volunteered. Plus, they had much stronger, older girls too that work in the kitchen, and there were big cans of food that we would bring. So we never volunteered. So when they told us they were going to leave this area, we thought that they're going to take us all together, wherever they take us. But you know, unfortunately, again, we had to get undressed, and that's how they selected the girls. And you know, the girls that was too skinny wasn't selected. I always remember when you go, some areas when you go to vote, there is a little booth with a curtain, you go in there to vote. And there was this little booth, and the girls that were too skinny, they were pushing into that little booth. And all of a sudden I see them pushing my sister, and I was very upset. And I was running to Miri. I said, you know, Miri, I want to be with my sister. Can I go with her or she goes with me? And she looked at me, she said, you know, you're not being fair. She's so skinny, they're going to take her someplace when they're going to have more food, so she should gain weight. I don't know if I was so naive that I had no idea. While we were in Auschwitz, I had no idea that there is a crematorium and a gas chamber. I had no idea. But even now, when I think of that, my sister must have known, because you know, each time we had selections, I could see that she was so afraid. You know, and I believe Miri, you know, it was hard to believe that anything that after the war you find out that happened, really. It was impossible, you know. And so this time they gave me a dress, and they took away my shoes and gave me a wooden shoes and even a coat, because it was early October. And they took us outside. I was in a group with some children, with some girls, you know, older, my age, older, and my friends from my hometown was in a different group. And girls were changing places with one another. You know, everybody wanted to be with friends or relatives. I cannot explain this, why I could have gone with them, why I didn't go. I have no explanation. Only after the war, I find that only 2 survived from that. You know? So we had no idea. We were so isolated, we had no idea what's going on in the rest of the world, you know. And they gave us this little package of crackers and cheese, and they took us to the train station. We didn't go too far. When we got off, there was 3 civilian men, and they owned the factory, and they looked us over, and they okayed us to work in the factory. So we went back on the train. I can't remember how long the train was going. When it stopped this town called Altenburg, that's where the ammunition factory was. And every morning, this older, you know, German soldiers, older men, would march us, you know, walk us to the factory to work, and sometimes women in uniform. And because I was considered between the young ones, like I said, in 1944, November, I became 18. I was already in the factory. We didn't know any dates, you know, but that day somehow somebody said this, you know, November 17, and I said, my God, I'm 18 years old, you know. So I was considered between the young ones, so I didn't work on the heavy machine, but in front of a table, there was a long table, and I don't know what it was, a wooden tray with this round black metal pieces, and you had to look inside. If it was damaged, you had to take it out. And watching us work, there was this German lady, you know, when I call an old German lady, when you're 18, I guess even 50 looks old, but I have to remember her because she was very, very kind to us, you know. At Christmas time, she bought us each a small little apple. And there was another very nice, very pure young lady, German lady, and she would whisper to us that my brother is in the army, and he wrote that the war is going to be over soon and you're going to be all right. And you know, during the night we heard planes go by, and you know, a lot of all kind of noises, you know, like the war noises. Like I said, we really had no idea what was going on. You know, the Germans had a shelter to go down, but we just stayed in the room. And it was going on, you know, for a long time. It was already April 1945, then they told us we're going to leave the factory. And it was very interesting. While we were marching all night, German people were running from all sides, carrying bundles, suitcases. Some had a little carriage they were pulling. We had no idea what was going on. And the strangest thing, you know, the old men that was coming with us, the soldiers, they had this little white flag in their hands. And a couple of the women in uniform put this white kerchief on their head. And we had no idea why. So finally we came to this town. It was already daytime, and they told us that this area was called Waldenburg, and they told us there are a lot of shooting going on, so we don't want to be hit by a bullet. And they showed us there is a little hill, we should go up there and lay down because we don't want to be hit by a bullet. And I remember laying there, and I never really seen a very young German soldier, and I see one coming with a machine gun, and I told to myself, maybe he came to kill us. But you know what? He was running away. We realized after the liberator was coming, and he was running away, hiding, So we spent that night up in those hills, and I became friendly with this. They were older than I was, 4 sisters, and another girl from their hometown. So, I miss my sisters, so I was trying to, make friends. I needed somebody, and they were older, were very nice. So while we were laying there, you talk to each other, and I became friendly with them. In the morning we came down from the hills, and this was 1945, April the 13th, on a Saturday. And then we came down from those hills, and there was a highway, and then we see this Jeep coming, and it stopped. There was a British soldier. And we were so hungry and thirsty, and he had all these boxes on his Jeep, and we didn't speak English. He was trying to talk to us because he had no idea who we were. And we really thought he's going to give us something, but I guess he had no idea who we were, and he just got back in the Jeep and left. And so we decided to go into town to try to find something, water or some kind of a food. And as we were walking, there was this little house, and the window opened up. And this lady called us in. We understood a little German. And she said, you must be hungry. I have some food. I don't have so much, but whatever I have, I'll give you. And I tell you the truth, the Nazis used to call us lazy Jews. But when we got to Auschwitz and Birkenau, we were still very clean, but at the end we were full of lice. Our dress was full of lice, and we were dirty. And she said you could wash up in the bathroom, so we just washed our hands, and she gave us something to eat. And she said that her husband and her son is in the army, but she said she has this empty room that was her son's, and we welcome to stay there that night. So we stayed there that one night, when I want to remember her. I don't know who she was, and she wasn't afraid the way we looked like dirty. It's amazing, how sometimes people, and you have to remember those people. But we thanked her in the morning, and we left, and God bless the American soldiers came in, and they were really wonderful. They even put on a concert for us. And there was this empty office building, and they set up a kitchen downstairs, and they bought us some couch to sleep on. But we were so anxious to go back to our home country. We really believed that our family is going to be back home. We had no idea what was going on. And the war was still on, and we couldn't go yet, But I remember one day 2 ladies came from the Red Cross, and they asked our ages, and I was considered, like I said, 18, very few, unless you looked older, that survived. It was just a miracle if anybody younger survived. And we were maybe about 4 of us, and they took us away to another camp, and they told us that if any of us want to go to any of the Scandinavian countries, families would adopt us, and we would have a very good life. I could tell you, nobody was interested in a good life, because we really believed that our families back home already, So we thanked them, and we waited until finally they told us that the war was over. But every time we tried to go down to try to get a train, the Russians were looting Germany, and you see these open wagons full of toilets and sinks and furniture, all kind of things. They were day and night. So the first passenger train we got on, the first stop was, this was a very famous resort place called Karlsbad. I think it was in Czechoslovakia, I'm not sure. And there were a couple of ladies waiting for us and asked us to go. They had a beautiful building. The first time we took a shower and we slept in a bed. And they told us we could stay as long as we want to stay. But like I said, we were just very anxious to go back to Hungary. So finally we got on the train, and we arrived in Hungary, and there was a lot of young men, Jewish young men, waiting by the station. they know more about what was going on, and anybody that survived, all of us young people that were working in factories, survived. And I was talking to this one young man, he was questioning me why I was from my name, and my mom had a sister that lived in Budapest, and he said, your aunt is back in their own apartment. I had two cousins one my age and one 2 years younger, and my uncle. So he said, they're back in their apartment. But he said, tonight you spend the night, we have a big building, everybody's staying there, you could eat dinner, and in the morning you could go see your aunt. I knew where my aunt lived. In the summer my two cousins would come down to us because it was like a country where we lived. And in the winter, like Christmas time, when we had off a couple of days from school, we would go to Budapest, and it was a beautiful city like Los Angeles. There was an amusement park and a circus. So I knew where my aunt lived, and I was really anxious to go. And I rang the bell, and my aunt opened the door, and she looked at me. She said, "You look familiar, but I have no idea who you are." She didn't recognize me. I was a little bit skinnier. And I tell you, no matter how much I cried, I find out what happened to everybody. Crying doesn't change anything, and the Russians were occupying Hungary, and I told my aunt I don't want to stay in the country. But my aunt came with me to my hometown, and they told me that the mayor ran away, but this young man was liberated by the Russians. He became the mayor. His name was Freddy Schwartz. It's interesting, most of the young men, they liberated the Russians. They just took him to Siberia, they really were nice. And he was telling me that sometimes for good luck, people carry this Hebrew writing for good luck when you travel. He had this in his pocket, and when he showed the Russian, he said, "Oh, you Hebrew," and he was lucky he let him go. So I was telling him about my mom's watch, where my father put it, and he said he's going to ask maybe somebody find it, but most of the homes were already loaded. Nobody wanted to take responsibility, but I really didn't care about things anymore, And he said, but wherever he finds it in the homes, he has a room there. I should go in and see if I recognize anything. And, I went into the room and I recognized these two silver candle holders, Jewish ladies light candles on Friday night before the Sabbath. And that was my mom's. So he gave me that, and we went back to Budapest. And 2 weeks later, he came up. He had my mom's watch, But you know what? My aunt and uncle, they had to sell valuables just to buy food. The situation was so bad after the war. People stand in line in the bakery to get a piece of bread. It was very bad. And they sold their valuables to have some money. Nobody had jobs. So I gave my uncle the watch to sell it because I needed clothes. And then I said to my aunt, I want to leave this country. So she said to me, well, I don't know where you're going to settle, but always remember the kind of a family you came from. It's interesting how nobody talked about, I never remember anybody asking how rich you are or how much. That everybody knows the reputation, how, but I mentioned that everybody knows that we this old rabbi's wife, grandchildren, everybody knows like that. But I was so sarcastic. I said to her, I guess Hitler didn't respect my family, And then a lot of people were leaving the country. There were different organizations, and they told me that I had some little children between 5 and 6 years old that was raised in an orphanage. They could use help. So I went to get to know those little children. There was a young woman with a little daughter, and she was with them too. And, I got to know those little children, when they cried, you gave them a hug. So I know they needed me, and that was so important that somebody needed you. And I told my aunt, I'm going to leave the country with them, I'm going to leave. And just before, it's called the Russian zone. The Russians liberated Hungary in January already, 1945, And so this area called the Russian zone, and we were on the train, and just before we went over to the American zone, these Russian soldiers came up on the train, and they were checking what everybody was carrying. And when they looked in my knapsack and they saw the 2 silver candles, they took everything. Honestly, I could tell you I couldn't care less about things, really. Things weren't important, And the only thing was that these children needed me, I had no idea what's coming, what the future is, but right then and then, the children needed me. And, they didn't even remember their parents. So I thought to myself how much luckier I am. At least I have good memories for my family. And the first stop was Vienna. But we didn't stay there too long. From there, they took us into, they called the area Bayern, to, where the DP camp is, displaced persons camp. All of us that lost our families and our homes were there. Thousands of us, young people that worked in factories. We survived, and we were all there. There was a lot of these DP camps in Germany. And this called Leibheim, And, we tried to teach the children. I wasn't a teacher, but I tried to teach the children, to read and write. And one day we put on a little show. They had a little stage. And I remember watching them, and this girl in front of me turned around. I remember mentioning, I became friends with those sisters. Well, they lived in a different town, so when we got to Budapest, we said goodbye to them. And to see her like finding your own family, that was, I couldn't believe it. And she said, we went up to Budapest to look for you, and your aunt and your uncle said that Marta is someplace in Germany, maybe you're going to find her. And I was so happy really to see her. And she was telling me that one of her sisters got married, and she stayed in Hungary. And she said, Goldie, my sister, also married a neighbor, a young man that lost his wife and his children. And she said, they are here, and Esther was the youngest. She was 2 years older than I was. And Hannah, she was about maybe 8 years older than I was. Later on, she also met a young man in camp, and he lost his wife and his child, and she married right in that camp in Leipheim. And I mentioned I had family my father had 2 older sisters, and my mother had an older sister also, and my uncle was the rabbi. I told you he came here about between 1938 and 1940. And it's interesting, things happened in life you don't know, you have no explanation for it. My father was the youngest of 7. He had 3 sisters and 4 brothers. They were 4 brothers. And the 2 older brothers were in the army. And I used to hear about this brother, Peter. He was a very sensitive young man. He used to write poems. And he went to visit the brothers in the army. And he said, they're so strict. I don't want to go into the army. So because already they had 2 sisters here in America, he came to America. They lived in New York. He got married. When I came to America, when I went to New York, his wife was alive, and he had a daughter named Lillian. And I don't know what kind of a machinery he was putting together, and it blew up, and he died. They used to tell me that my grandma died of a broken heart because of that son. It's hard to explain things, what happens, but after the war, you feel a lot of guilt that I survived and not my sister and my brother, and people told you how lucky you are. You didn't feel that lucky, it was very emotional, you feel guilt and losing your whole family. It was very difficult, and, I had papers already to fill out to come to America, but thousands of other people wanted to come, so it wasn't that simple to come. And one day we heard an announcement that if any of us want to go to Canada, families would sponsor us. And Esther and I signed up. And Esther and I went to Canada, to Toronto. And I stayed with this family, had 2 little boys. And I started to go to school to learn to speak English. And during the day, I tried to help with the little boys wherever I could help, Fortunately, they spoke Jewish. I really didn't speak that Jewish, but I could understand a little bit, so I could communicate with them a little bit, but not with the little boys. But, somehow with children, you just hug him, and play with him, it was fine. And then I wrote to my family in New York, and my uncle wrote to them that, please let me come to New York so I should be with family. And everybody said, oh, you're not going to like New York, Canada is so much nicer. But you know what? All the young teenagers went to New York because Canada was very nice, but it was not too much action, very quiet. Especially, they lived in the suburb of Toronto, I still remember the Realmar Garden, it's called. It was really beautiful, and the name was Feinberg, and he manufactured those, when you see this glass, I think, bookends, you shake it and you have snow in there, that's what he manufactured. But they were very, very nice people. But eventually I came to New York. But one thing I remember about Canada, when you went to the movies, I went to the movies and I looked for a person to buy candy. There were candy, everything, and nobody was there. So I went home and I said, I would have loved to buy some candy, but nobody was there. They said, nobody was there. You could buy, they trust you to buy it. That was surprising, right? I don't think anywhere in the world I never heard of. But before the war, people didn't lock where we lived. We didn't lock our doors. Everybody trusted each other. We never heard of anything robberies or, really was a different world. Once upon a time, you children don't know, was a different world. But anyway, I came to New York and I lived with my aunt, my father's older sister, Aunt Frida. She had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. They were married. She had grandchildren. And I find a job not far from my aunt's house. And there was a little shop. This girl was from Europe, from Germany, and she made children's clothes. And she was teaching me how to work the machine. And most of the girls that worked there was refugees from Europe, And I'm trying to think the language. Everybody could get along. We struggled all with the English, but everybody got along, and I was happy to just work. And at night I went to school. I tried to learn English, and my aunt said one day, I have a niece that doesn't live too far from here, and they would like to meet you. Well, people visited at night because everybody worked during the day. And she said her name is Ellie and her husband's name is Morris, and it wasn't far. We went to visit them and it was very nice. And then there is a young man comes in. Morris had a single brother named Sidney, and he came in, and it was fine. They all spoke Hungarian, so I had no problem. Even my cousins spoke Hungarian, because when my aunts came to this country, they were young and they had children. They really didn't speak that good. Even my children, certain things they would. How do you say, put the light on? We say open the light, because when you interpret it from the language, it sounds different. You could almost tell children that had European parents, And it was very nice. And just before we left, Sidney asked me for my telephone number. Well, I didn't have a telephone, so I said to him, I guess your sister-in-law has my aunt's telephone number. But when we left, my aunt said, it wasn't nice the way you said that. Well, I said, I don't know what the rules over here, but I tell you, I really wasn't ready to get married or meet anybody. And I could tell you that a lot of young people married in those camps, the DP camp, they were lonely. I didn't think that was right, because I remember this young couple, I mentioned Goldie had a little boy, and he was sitting up other than this other couple had also the same age little boy, and this little boy couldn't sit up anymore. That they had to leave her in an institution. They couldn't bring her to America. They had relatives here, and they had to leave him in an institution, And so I didn't think it was right to get married. You don't even know, if you have a child, if you have food for the child. So I didn't feel that was responsible. And, young people, you meet young people, you like girls, boys, and sometimes these young men would look at me and say, something wrong with you, because I was even afraid to touch. I didn't have anybody protect me, your reputation was, but it's interesting. The first Saturday I was in New York, and like I said, I had my aunt, the rabbi, and I went out for a walk, and people recognized me from the DP camp. And they told me what a nice girl I was. That meant a lot because there were organizations, and I belonged to the most religious organizations, you know. But I did something that wasn't right for to do. My cousin sent me a package, and you know, Saturday you're not allowed to write or anything else. But I was anxious to get that package. So there was this young man. He was Jewish from Poland, and I said to him, you know, if you come with me to sign the paper, I'm going to give you whatever I'm getting in the package. And he signed for me, and the rabbi found out about it. They said, you know, that was worse than you ask somebody that's not Jewish, because he made him have a sin now. It's crazy religion, right? I don't do that anymore, but you know what? We all God's children, and that's important to know. You're a good person. That's more important to be a good person. That, you know, sometimes religion are so fanatics, you know. Anyway, so there was a lot of discussion between my aunt and her niece, and finally Sydney called me up and asked me out for a date. By then I learned what a date is. So, well, I didn't want to hurt his feeling again, so I said, okay. And, you know, he was the youngest of 5. He had 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. You know, one of his sisters was also in Auschwitz and had a little daughter that was killed in Auschwitz. And she even had number in her arms. And her husband survived also, so they were all here together, the whole family. And whenever he talked about the family, you know, it really felt so familiar. And we dated for a while, and he said, you know, he wants to marry me. He was 29 and I was 24, you know, because doesn't matter the age really today, you know. If you don't marry very young, you get too smart already. So he said he wants to marry me, but I said to him, you know, let's not rush into anything, just let's wait. You know, we got to know each other a little bit more. Well, by the time I went back to my aunt's house already, everybody knows that I'm going to do. And he said to me one day, you know, my sisters are in the Catskill Mountains, very hot in New York in the summer. And so when you had a little child, you went up to the Catskill Mountains, and their husband would go up Sunday to visit. And so he said, you know, I have a friend, Ernie has a car. His wife and his little daughter is there, and he's going to drive us there in the Catskill Mountains. And that was nice. He said, just bring a pretty dress. Everybody dresses up for dinner. So we arrived. Everybody had this little bungalow, and dinner time, everybody's all dressed up, going in the dining room. And I'm all dressed up by the door, and Sydney's just sitting in the... I said, you know, it doesn't look really nice for a single girl and a boy be alone. And I was by the door. I really didn't even want to be near him. And he said, we don't have to rush. But as soon as we opened the dining room door, everybody's yelling surprise. It was an engagement party for us. But I used to tease him. I said, you really tricked me. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of everybody, so I accepted. And we got married in 1950. You know, love is very important, but I was so scared of showing any feeling. But I think when you get to know a person, and not the kind of a love that you respect, you know, I think when you get married and you get to know each other. And he was such a good person, hardworking. He came here when he was 16. He got a job as a delivery boy. He knew how to ride a bicycle. He worked for a butcher, and he was teaching him the business. We got married in 1950. You see my ring? Inside, but the date is December the 3rd, but our Hebrew name, and this is in Hebrew. You know what it means? You are mine, and I'm your beloved. And that's a nice saying, you know. I saw a rabbi's wife had this, and I said to my husband, I don't care about really a lot of jewelry, but this is so nice. I don't know who is going to inherit it when I'm gone. You know. And in a year later, a son was born. His name is Harvey, and 2 years later, a daughter named Karen, and 11 months later, a daughter named Linda. I have to tell you, Linda was in a hurry. You know, she was a very good student, and she finished high school, skipped 1 year, you know. And we lived in a town called named Teaneck in New Jersey, and there was a university, Fairleigh Dickinson, and she enrolled in the university, and she met this very nice young man, Stephen, and fell in love. That's it. You know, it was hard to understand. The rumors were that they're going to take us in the island of Madagascar. That's what the rumors. I know that when people said, "Oh, there's a lot of mosquitoes there," but we didn't care. We were together. We had no idea. Nobody ever heard of Auschwitz or the crematorium or Deepik. Nobody knew about this, and it's almost like I used to tell my children. When they were young, I never talked about it. Once my daughter asked me what happened because all her friends had two grandparents. So I said, there was a big fire in Europe. I didn't really want to say anything. But somebody approached me to this Yale University, gave a grant to this college, Ramapo College, to take testimonies. And then I made a tape for my children. It's a tour, very detailed what happened. Then they were married already, they were secure that they should know what happened. And the first time in Jersey, when my husband was sick already, we were in an assistant living, they asked me if I want to go to the school. It was just before Christmas time. And they were young children, so that's what I told them right away. I said, look at me like I'm your almost great grandmother. I'll be 92 soon. So, I was telling her my favorite time was Christmas time and thing, but, you had to tell them, what happened. We only bought, shoes and clothes, it's nothing else. We all, I guess, had a watch or I had a ring, I remember I had a ring. When I was in Budapest, it broke, and after the war, my aunt said, you left this ring here one time. I don't even know what happened to it. But, like I said, families were the most important thing. Nothing else mattered, just to be together. This was the most important thing. In the ghetto, well, we were helping, there was a community kitchen, and my mom, like I said, he was always there, so he said, girls go and see, young mothers standing in line for food, so you make sure you help whatever you could help, with the children, whatever you could do. What we want, wherever they take us, we didn't care because we were really believing that wherever they take us, we'll be together. So it didn't, it was terrible, uncomfortable in the train, the young children were crying and old people complained. But, we didn't complain. I said to you, my father said at one time, because, how long can you hold? You have to go to the bathroom. And they had this bucket. And young girls, and my father said, you have to relieve yourself, And he would say, I'm so proud of you, we all behaved really. We never questioned or complained anything, I don't know what my parents knew about. Like I said, I had no idea what my mother knew, why she said she was 52. I had no idea. These couples, we had no idea where we were or what was going on, and it was very scary, especially after they pushed my mother away. But we still believed, and he said that you're going to see her later. We still believe that, especially after we saw those families, when we were already in the barracks, we saw those families. There were families together from Czechoslovakia, so we really believed that families could stay together. Everybody got along there, we tried to cheer each other up. It's interesting, there were two girls had very good voices, and to keep us quiet when we were in the barracks, they used to sing songs. There was an interesting thing because these two girls had grandparents in my hometown, and in the summer they would also come to spend time with them. So we all know each other, my two cousins. Another interesting story, one of my cousins went to Palestine, Israel, and she was called in the kibbutz. She was waiting for the bus, and these girls also, and they were all from Hungary, and they tried to talk to each other, and all of a sudden they realized who they were. This one of the girls, and she survived, not the younger sister, and she was my sister's age. And it was interesting. And about a year ago, I talked to my cousin. She said she just passed away. Like I said, she was my sister's age. And my cousin is still, and she's not well, but she's still alive. And from the two cousins from Budapest, one lives in Borough Park, very religious. She was married to a rabbi. She has 34 grandchildren and over 50 great-grandchildren. you know. So I talked to her at least twice a week, you know. And she was telling me that the family was together. She said, I looked around the room. I said to my son, they are all mine. So he said, yes, Mom, this is the way we're getting even with Hitler. We raised our children with love. I never talked about it, but I have to mention this. If people say, I wouldn't go to Germany, I hate the Germans, I said, that's not fair, because this is already the third generation. You think children should suffer for their father or grandfather's sins? I don't think so. You know, we want to mend the world. We want to live in peace, you know. I have to mention, after my husband passed away in 2016, he had Alzheimer's, you know, almost 2 years. And my children asked me what I wanted to do for my 90th birthday. So I said to them, I want to go to Disneyland. I don't know why. You know, I don't know if you heard of that reactor in China and in Russia. They blow up the Chernobyl reactor. So they brought these children from Russia here, and they asked them what they liked in America. They said Disneyland. Everybody is so happy there. I said, I want to see everybody happy, and my children came, my grandchildren came. I have one granddaughter and 2 grandsons. My granddaughter wrote to them, and we got a private guide. Not only that, but a big button with my 90th birthday and a whole package, the ears and all kind of goodies. Very nice. Yeah, they're very nice, yeah. So after, I didn't want to go back either, like my son, he didn't want to go back. And also my granddaughter, you know what my granddaughter does? She was in a lot of shows all Broadway. When she was in junior high, she was in a theater group. She has a good voice singing. And she came here, but there's a big competition, so she does voiceover, cartoon voices, and audio book tapes. Her name is Tara Sands. You could look her up. Anyway, so I stayed here, and I'm an assistant living. Many times I said, what am I doing with those old people? But I don't want my children to worry about me, so I'm doing fine, you know. I never forget that the very last night we were together, you know, we were hugging. Like I said, she must have known something. It's almost like I could see her face that she was so scared, you know. And that's it. And when she said to go with my friends, you know, I heard after, when the war was over, they were liberated already. Many young people died after. They were telling me there were the 2 girls my age, that one was Katie and one was Edith. And they were already liberated. There was no good drinking water. They had just water to wipe, you know, wash their hands. And she must have drank from the water. And in the morning, she was trying to wake her up. Katie was trying to wake her up, and she was dead. There was another one of the 2 older sisters, older girls. One survived, and one. So Katie said she was very sick. She couldn't walk when she was liberated by the Americans and took her to the hospital. But as soon as she felt better, she was looking for Olga. She couldn't find her. You know, she worked in the kitchen. She was always so hungry, you know. So a lot of girls after liberation, they ate so much, you know, their stomach wasn't strong enough. And many of the girls passed away after, you know, after liberation already. And the other girl named Lucille, so she was sick, and they took him to Sweden. So Katie and Lucille went to Sweden. They didn't go back to Hungary. But they never went back, you know. It's interesting. Then they came, Lucille came to America, and they both came to America, you know, after. When I came, they were already here when I came here. They were already here when I came here, yeah. Because I went first to Canada. But they both have relatives here, you know, and they all came here. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, you know, certain things. Sometimes I skip certain things. And my granddaughter came with me. He said, Grandma, you forgot this and you forgot. But I'm going to tell you, in 1983, when President Reagan was in the White House, thousands of us survivors went to Washington to thank America. You know, from all over the world, people come here, and you want to work and find, you know, raise your children in a peaceful work, you worship, whatever you want to do. And he made such a nice speech. He said, you find a safe haven here, nobody ever going to harm you. But also he mentioned that when Hitler came to power, Mr. Churchill said you have to stop him, and they called him a warmonger, you know. And Mr. Churchill asked President Roosevelt for help, and he refused. America got only into the war after Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese won. But I tell you something, there was a Japanese gentleman that was I don't know, ambassador to, not Poland, but I'm trying to think, Ukraine, I don't know exactly. When I go to the museum, his picture is there. He gave visas for the whole school. And the government wasn't happy with him when he went back to Japan. He never talked about it. He had a little baby, a little girl, a boy, son, when they left Poland. And you must know the story, and only after that his children were grown up, somebody was telling, and there is an Israel, they call Yad Vashem, and they honoring the righteous Gentiles, because he said, if you save one life, like you saved the whole world. And the whole school was saved. And they were in Shanghai. That time, Shanghai belonged to Japan, but now it's in China. It's remember, because when I went to the synagogue, this man said, he was in World War I, a soldier, and they were in Shanghai, and they invited them, they called it the ghetto where the Jews lived. And the next day I was watching television, and the president from Israel, Netanyahu, is visiting Shanghai, they're showing where all the Jews stayed. It was interesting. We got up in the morning, I think they gave us something to eat, and I don't remember having lunch, just standing all day. But when you're young, I'm going to tell you something. Hunger and being tired or anything, nothing bothered me, but emotionally, it was terrible. After I was separated from my sister, you become like a robot, like a zombie, just follow orders, because you just so you feeling, and you don't want to cry. People see you crying, you're a grown up, you consider grown up. So that was really very hard. But these sisters were such wonderful people, really, really, that was good for me to be friends. And until they were alive, we really kept up the friendships, whenever we could get together, that was important. In the place where we slept already, we had a straw mattress. And we had two next to each other, but kind of separate. And I didn't think I had a cushion, but I used my coat to cover. I had a coat. But, I never even mentioned this, but, from vitamin sufficiency, my arm and my leg broke out, And I went to the infirmary, they gave me something, but at night when I covered up with my coat, it used to stick to the lining, it didn't really heal, so, things like that. I never even, I made the tape, but I mentioned when I made the tape for my children, but sometimes it's, it's so painful, I'm going to mention something interesting that all the years I never talked about. I was with my son and my daughter-in-law, and all of a sudden, after the war, it was very hard to get food. In Budapest was a big city, so my cousin and I went down to the city where my grandmother lived. And I don't know, I can't remember who this girl was. It was a Saturday, and we went out for a walk. It was a little cool. And if you're not Jewish, you don't know that you're not supposed to carry things on Saturday. You sometimes have a thing to certain area to carry. And I went out for a walk, and I had this sweater or blazer on my shoulder, and she did too. And we walking back, and her mother is by the door, and she said to her daughter, don't you know that today is Saturday? You're not supposed to wear it like this. So she said, well, my mother is wearing it like this. She said, well, mother doesn't have a mother to tell her. Well, I could tell you that hit me like a brick. You're the same person, whether you're dirty or clean. I know who I was, and I had a beautiful family, and I was so lucky because my parents were very educated. Like I said, my father went to medical school, very open-minded, never punished. If they had to explain, they explained things to us. Never had to discipline us. Really, and I always say I never lost faith in God. I don't know how old I was, maybe 6, 7 years old. I was at my friend's house, and the neighbor had this apple tree, and you're young, you eat green apples, so one of the branches was on her side, and we were holding on to the branch to get the green apples, and there was an old couple that lived there. They must have seen the tree move, And we heard them yelling. I got so scared I ran home. And my mom saw, I got so scared. I had to tell her the truth. But I said, everybody shopped in our store. It would be embarrassing to know I steal their apple. So I said to my mom, but they didn't see me. So my mom said, maybe they didn't see you, but I'm going to tell you something you better remember for the rest of your life. Maybe the people didn't see you, that God sees everything that you do. And I still believe that. And I also believe there is a heaven and their soul is in heaven. I don't know if anybody, there are a couple of things they called Hallelujah. There's in Hebrew. But I heard a girl one night, I watched the concert on television, and when I heard this girl sing Hallelujah, I had an idea and I made up this. I'm saying, Hallelujah, I'm alive. Hallelujah, I have survived. But dear God, I'm so very sad because evil people murdered my whole family and my friends. And I know their soul is up with you in heaven. So please, dear God, take good care of them. And when the day will come when my soul will be with all of them, then I'm going to sing Hallelujah again. And I thought that, I told my children, I said, I couldn't help it, but I had to, something that, it hit me when I heard that girl sing Hallelujah. As a matter of fact, this concert was from Hungary. It was interesting because the violin player was a Hungarian, the piano player was American, one singer was from Russia, an opera singer, and the girl that sang Hallelujah was an African-American young lady with a very good voice. It was very interesting, So that gave me an idea. I was working a lot around this long table, and let's see, maybe we were like 10 of us by the table, and the older ones, heavier girls, older was working on the heavy machine. So I never seen them, because we were in a separate room. But it's interesting, at Christmas time we heard a lot of music. Things happen to you. You could cry about it, or you could find something positive about it. I remember during Christmas time, I heard them playing the beer barrel polka. It was interesting. And you heard a lot of music. My grandson was small. The youngest was about a year old. We were in Pennsylvania. My grandson, the older was 2.5, and my daughter, my son-in-law, we went to Hershey Park. I don't know if anybody knows Hershey Park. And it was a very hot day. And the older grandson, they had a show in the water with the seals, whatever, and he wanted to see that, but it was very hot. So they were indoors, and my husband and my youngest grandson, a year-old Alex, we were indoors, and then all of a sudden came entertainment. I see these two men, in Germany, in Bayern, they used to wear the leather shorts with the suspenders, and two older men with the young men. And they start playing the beer barrel polka. And for a minute I got the chills, And I wouldn't tell anything for my husband about it because he would have been probably sad and walk out. I don't know if they were Germans or Swiss. We don't know because the Swiss were like this. But for a minute, but the word déjà vu, that's the kind of a feeling I had. And then I see everybody tapping and clapping hands, and I took my grandson's hand and I was clapping and clapping. I said, why should I feel bad? I'm here, I'm alive, and they're entertaining me. So why should I feel bad? You could be negative about it or you could be positive. And this is what I am. If I am alive, there is a reason for it. And I have a beautiful family, my children, and so I'm just thankful, and I have wonderful memories. And like I said, I believe that all their souls are in heaven. Things happen in life that we have no explanation, but there's something beyond that we can't explain. Like I mentioned, that they were responsible for us, and sometimes they show when the Nazis were watching them, the SS, they show that they talked to us. When this girl hit me with the strap, somebody was watching them, how they're treating us. And, they like the idea that they mean to us. You know, this is what happened. You know, but I heard, I did never know about the crematorium, but people that work in the crematorium, every couple of months they kill them too. They weren't able to talk about it. So all these things, you know, it's a lot of things happen that, you know, it's hard to explain. I saw, what's his name, Mengele. He was very good looking, and there was a beautiful blonde woman too. They were rumors that that's a girlfriend, gorgeous woman walking with him. And only once I saw somebody was beaten, you know. We had this woman, she was a doctor, you know, she was with us, and she saw her husband through the wire. I don't know where he was going, you know, and he was trying to talk to us. You know, when new transport came and they passed by us, you know, the way we look like, we heard them, the Hungarians say, look at the crazy people alive here, you know, because sometimes people yell, can you throw me your sweater or something, because they're going to take it away from me. They didn't know what was going on, they just arrived there. So, you know, they really thought we were crazy. So, you know, so this SS woman saw her talking, and she was beating her up. That she didn't cry, she stood there straight, she didn't make a move. She did survive. It was interesting. That's the first time I saw from there that woman, you know, women uniform, you know. I mean, that depends on the personality of someone. Some people had a heart, were more human, and some didn't, you know. This is just, like I said, they followed orders. You don't know. Situations arise that you have no idea. Would you save somebody and risk your life? You know, it's very hard to understand. You know, like I said, I want to remember all those when we worked, the young lady and the old lady, and that woman that asked us to come into her house. You know, that amazed to me how she wasn't afraid. You know, there are still good people in this world, you know, but it's more good than bad. You know, love is stronger than hate. But unfortunately, we still have people that hate. As soon as we got there, he was separated. I'd never seen him again. Because he was probably considered old now. 1944, he was 53. And my brother looked very young. He was 16, but he was small. He looked much younger. Plus, you know, by this end, the Nazis were killing everybody because there were so many people, they didn't know what to do with them, you know. I tell you, I went back with my husband with a tour to Auschwitz. I can't remember what year. You know, they blew up the crematorium, you know. And that's what I'm saying, you know, they had a sign there that works make you free and all this kind of a thing. And I heard from people when they arrived during the day, there was music there, the whole orchestra was playing. They were camouflaging things, you know. And there was a DP camp in Czechoslovakia. And when the Red Cross came, they took him there, you know, to show them how beautiful. They put music on and all kind of thing to show. So they were very clever the way they did things. So how many years, you know? I mean, but you know, while we were in Auschwitz and we talked about things, if we ever come out alive, the world is going to hear about it. It's going to change for the better. It didn't happen. You know? But it doesn't mean that you have to be mean, you know. I guess that's it. Of course, it's the nature of people, you know, they're unhappy. I have many people where I am in the old age home and they were born in this country, never went through anything, and they bitter and angry because they got old and they have, you know, all kind of problems. Well, this is it. People live longer now with the medication they give you, you know. I remember talking with my friend, my sister from my hometown, and we talked about if it's gonna be so that we can't take it anymore, we had enough. You know, the wires were electric wires, and you could go well. Either you risk because they were watchdogs with guns, you know, either they would shoot you or you would go. But there were always rumors, you know. Once they said, oh, this rabbi sent the message, you have to wear a red ring. Now, if anybody had something red, we used to pull out the thread and put it on our finger. It's almost like a drowning man will grasp through, you know. This is, and I could tell you, while we were together, you know, you know, we still talked about home, and you know, it's hard to understand. I'm going to tell you something. Now that I'm talking about it, I myself surprised how we really survived. But like I said, there was always something, a reason for it. If you know, you heard about Elie Wiesel, a little skinny boy like that. But you know what, I went to once, I even bought a book, my children have the book. In a synagogue he came to speak about what happened. And he was telling us that when he was a little boy, you know, he was very religious, and his mother took him to this famous rabbi. And the rabbi said, one day you're going to be very famous. So you don't know. His father passed away there. And look, my sister was as healthy as I was. My brother was healthy. You don't know. You don't know. Hitler made a remark when he started, when I get through with the Jews, even the one going to stay alive, he never forget it. And that's exactly what he did, you know. But it doesn't mean that we have to be mean or want to get even. That's not the answer for that. I don't believe in that, you know. Many times I think I hope and pray that the whole world be like one Disneyland. Wouldn't that be great? Everybody would be happy. And it would cost less than wars, right? It's very hard to understand. I talked to this smart young man. I said to him, tell me, technology, everything is so advanced. Why can't they figure out how to make peace? He said it's easier to invent a machine or go to the moon than deal with people's mentality that they were already so brainwashed, you know. This is probably, you were lucky enough to have parents that very understanding. That's how I grew up, you know. Another thought I'm going to tell you, you know, people don't eat ham and, you know, you kosher. So we had candy and chocolate in the store, and then you go out to play with your friends. I always bring candy to give. And I had a friend, it wasn't really a friend, she was older than I was, a neighbor. And I came out one day and she was eating something and I was offering candy. She said, I only take it if you're going to eat what I have. And I thought if I say no, then it means I don't want her to have candy, you know. When you're a little girl, you have this. So I said, okay. So she told everybody that I ate ham. So my mom asked me and I started to cry. She said, you know, I was a rabbi's daughter. She said, we had neighbors and they had a piano and I loved to go there. They let me play the piano and they gave me food. I never told anybody. I ate whatever they gave me. This made a whole lot different, the way you were raised. And I told this to somebody, he said, oh, my parents would have beaten me up. No, that's how that stupid thing. This the difference, you know. And today you still have people that think that way, you know, very negative about things and very, I mean, it's hard to understand for me. Very honestly, when I came into my husband's family, when my nephew was older, when my sister-in-law's son, you know, we were together, family, and she looked at me and said, why are you so different? You know, we talked about, because I talked about the story, you know, and something fell down and somebody picked it up. I said, I remember this story about Jesus, you know. He was walking with a friend, and he saw, I don't know, the money that time, let's see, a penny. And his friend wouldn't bend down. He picked up but 2 more pennies. He picked up 3 pennies. They came to a marketplace, and he bought 10 pieces of cherries. And he walked in front of his friend, and he was throwing down the cherries, and his friend bent down 10 times. So my nephew looked at me and said, oh, that's why you're different, because you know about, it's important to know about other people and understand them. Don't criticize them, understand them, you know. That's why I like to read about things. I didn't have a chance for an education, but I read a lot. And you know what my favorite show, Jeopardy. You'd be surprised, I know the answers and all those educated people. And I'm smiling to myself, I know the answer, because every book that you read, you know, you learn. You know, I'm reading now about Eisenhower. I need the last print. But I just finished a book about a submarine during World War II, Americans in the submarine. You know, they were torpedoing Japanese boats. And I don't know how that's possible. The torpedo came back and hit their submarine. And do you know that the submarine sank? But I don't know how many survived. And the Japanese picked them up. They were floating in the ocean, and they picked them up, and they were very mean to them. And you know, when you read about that, and when you go to Arlington Cemetery, or here they have a cemetery too, you know, your heart is breaking. Young people, for what, you know? That's why, you know, you talk about, I don't care what the president talk about. If he could make peace with everybody, then I don't care what he says and what he does. Just to make peace, we shouldn't have any war, because nobody in this world, every family loses a loved one, and that's so terrible, you know. To die, you know, it just really, you know, when you read about it, you know, it's just very hard to understand why they can't figure out to have peace. Their sisters, they were very good seamstresses. I really didn't know them just by looking, you know, I never talked to them because we had our own friends, you know. But after the war, and you know, it's interesting because those blockade testers, you know, I don't know where, you know, thing that came in, we bought in good clothes and things, I don't know where they had fabrics. They used to sew the blockade tester things, you know. I used to watch them, you know, so we watched each other, and the two girls used to sing to keep us quiet, you know. But I tell you, the very first night when we came there, this girl, she was crying. She was saying, everybody said she's going crazy. She was saying where my father is, what happened, and then how they were burying valuable things. You know, so everybody said she was crazy, but well, she was making so much noise, they just took her away. Then with another one, I don't know how she got there, that, you know, a couple of days later, she was giving birth, you know, she was crying, but also she was taken away, we never saw her. And everybody said, don't ever complain that you're sick, because once they take you away, you never come back. And these things, you know, it's such a, you know, it's, like I said, it's very hard to understand after, when you think about things, you know. But while we were there, we were concerned, you know, everybody was hungry, and I remember they had this bread, it looked like mud. And if you were two, you get a whole. But if you were single, you cut it in half. So these two, Edith and Katie, said, maybe we're gonna take a whole, it's better, because sometimes they give you the smaller half. So the Lucy, she was older than I, so she took a thread and she cut it, make sure it's even, you know, things like that. You were concerned, you were hungry, you know, and all this kind of a thing, you know, it just, you know, all kind of, you know, it's hard to explain things, how you felt about it, you know, and if you, there's, Olga worked in the kitchen, you know, if she came, she was hiding the potato peel raw. It was like, if you're hungry, you eat that too. What we talked about, then we used to remember, you know, mostly food. When we go home, what we're gonna eat, you know. And now you have all the things, and you have to watch. You have to take medication for cholesterol. This is the thing that really, you know, you're hungry. That's it. You're young and you wanna eat. How can you escape when you were, you know, watching you from the watchtower, and nobody even escaping, not from Auschwitz, not from the camp, not from the factory. It's hard to imagine. The only thing that I was really believing, that my whole family is back alive. That's the thing I was hoping. I never believed that, because I had no idea. I really had no idea. All the girls we talked about, we got to know each other, you know, where they were from, and, you know, we talked, we all spoke Hungarian. Most of it around me was Hungarian. But I tell you the truth, there were another radio, we shared the washroom with them. There were political prisoners, you know, girls, they had their own clothes from Czechoslovakia, from Poland, and they were not Jewish. I don't know where they worked, or, you know, I only saw them in the washroom. You know, they were very, you know, looked very good. They got packages from home, you know. So, you know, you talked about all kind of things. You know, another thing that I remember, you know, you had to have a mark on your coat which factory you worked. And I tell you, when I had all these scabs on I was so embarrassed. I went late at night when I know not many girls going to be there. I was embarrassed the way I looked like. And Miri was with us, and she said, you know, we have to make sure today is the last day to mark your coat, make sure you come. And I was waiting and went to the washroom, and I came very late, and I thought to myself, okay, I have to go, and she has to mark my coat, and she's going to yell at me probably because I'm late. But I always remembered my mom used to always say, dress like a lady and always be a lady. And I thought to myself, okay, let's see. I said to Miri, please hear me out before, I'm very sorry, I had to go, I have problems, and I had to go, and I have my coat. You didn't mark my coat. She didn't say one word, she marked my coat. If somebody hit you with a stone, you hit them with a bread. What happens if you keep on hitting each other with a stone? This is what's going on in this, people that should know better and try to have peace. These are the kind of things that I was brought up with. You heard, because you never met mean people, really. While I lived in town, I never met mean people. I never know what it is. And your first reaction, somebody hurt you, you want to hit them back, right? But you know better. I have this man that's sitting with me, and somebody said he's not Jewish because he's really a big guy, and he said the Jews are all small, small people. He said, somebody called him a dirty Jew. He was a teenager. He said, I beat the guy up. He said, I went to pray he shouldn't die. This is the kind of thing, because a boy, and I'm going to tell you, my brother went to, they called the yeshiva, the parochial school. And they used to have the earlocks. And he would come home, and my mom cut it off, because he was afraid that he's going to go and somebody had a fight, and everybody in town. And he cried. He said, what is the rabbi going to say? Then I go back to school. He said, just explain to the rabbi. If they're saying when you in Rome, you do what the Romans do. Well, not everything, but this is the kind of a thing that we wanted to get along with everybody. Well, the old lady, I think that time it was because I was still so lonely, and when she came and she was kind to us, she talked, we understood a little bit German, and she gave us that little app. I don't know at that time where she got, but that was, that's why I don't want to forget it, because, and the other women that asked us to come inside into her home, I never want to forget that, because that was really wonderful. She wasn't afraid. I mean, how many people we were dirty, full of lies, But, thank God we were all decent people, we wouldn't hurt her or take advantage of, that makes the whole difference. You were young. I never felt tired or, you march, you follow orders and you march, that's it. We were just walking, and, we had no idea what was going on. And you see all this chaos on the road, There were, like I said, I don't know if anybody much younger than I am, people were much older, and anybody, they had a friend or a sister, you helped each other and you did that. And, those friends were really very nice. I'm in touch with one of the daughters, Esther's daughter. You see, the poles were, on fire, there was still a lot of, the Liberator was coming in, there was still a lot of fighting going on, So when you walk, you see there's, the electric poles, on fire, as you were walking. Like I said, it was such a chaos on the road. We had no idea what was going on. We didn't know that the war is going to be over. It was over already. We had no idea. It was a surprise. But I'm going to tell you, when we came down from those hills that Saturday, and we saw the two the women walking, and we said hi. They call them in German Aufsehen, look over at you or something like that. We said hi. We don't know where they were going with, because I heard from people that, one of these Polish men lived in a forest for 3 years, and the first German they find, they killed. I could never do something like that. I don't think two wrong doesn't make one right. So we were human, and You couldn't hurt anybody. We really wasn't sure. We weren't sure yet that the war wasn't really over, but it was interesting. But we couldn't talk to them. We couldn't speak English, so we didn't know. But then when the Americans came in, that finally that you felt like you were liberated. Yeah, to go back home to Hungary to see, because I believed that everybody was alive back in Hungary. That as soon as it's possible to go back home. That's the only thing. This was April the 13th. I told you that Saturday when we came down from the hills, 1945, April the 13th on a Saturday, and the war was still on. We couldn't go back. So I'm trying to think how long. April, May. So it was sort of like middle of May, I think, when finally we got the train and go back to Hungary. I don't even know when I saw Mary, I tell you the truth. When I guess went back to my aunt, I don't think I even cared because it was such an emotional reunion, when I find out that nobody survived. And the Russian and my cousin said when they were already liberated, the Russians came in. They were in a shelter because there was still a lot of shooting going on. I don't know if anybody knows Budapest. Buda and Pest is connected with a chain bridge. And the Russians were on one side and the Nazis were on the other side and were shooting over the Danube River, and people had furnitures hiding behind that, And my cousin said they were in a shelter and somebody came to tell us, don't you go out, because those Russians, they were in Germany too, they were raping the women. So they told them not to go out. We had this chaplain, he came and he asked everybody's name because they were going from camp to who survived, to show us, to show the names, because there were sister brothers, the different areas, many survived, they didn't know about each other. And so they took our name, but I'm going to tell you, these 4 sisters had another sister that was very sick, and she was taken with an ambulance. And so they told this rabbi, that clergyman, rabbi, whatever, that they had a sister to find out what happened. And he found out she was in the hospital, and they did go to see her, and she couldn't recognize. She was very sick and confused. So the nurse said, we're giving her medication. She's going to feel better. You come back in a couple of weeks, I don't know how long they waited till go back. But when they went back, they told them that she passed away. She was buried in Germany. They told them exactly where she was buried. And another thing happened, on the way back, Esther developed appendicitis, and they had to leave her in a hospital. And while they came back, we were on the American side, and the Russian came in, and where Esther was in the hospital, it was the Russian zone. And they couldn't go there, they wouldn't dare to go there. But do you know that the whole Europe was such a chaos, people was hitchhiking, everybody was running, not only us, but even the Germans. So he was hitchhiking back when she felt better. And she was telling us that, they had there was a little brook running, and one side was the American a soldier, and the other side was a Russian, the boat. And she came up to the Russians, and she said, I couldn't talk to them, but she gave me a hug. She said, I didn't care, I just showed her, let me go over there. And she came, and it was a surprise to see her back, It's interesting, because I don't think she even told her children that. But I made a tape, and I told my daughter to send it to her daughter to know. It's interesting, because some things, I don't know what the reason sometimes, like I said, when somebody told me, Martha hasn't got a mother, that I never mentioned that, so my son is a psychiatrist, and I asked him. So she said, because that was the most painful thing, so you didn't even want to mention that. It's interesting. Auschwitz, they had better, they used to have some covers, but when we went to Birkenau already, they was just terrible, because that was the last money that they bring the Hungarian. But it's interesting, when they bought us the food, they had some kind of a soup, and when they gave you in the dish, if a little bit fell on the floor, people that was there from Poland, some of them, they were so hungry they would lick up from the dirt. That because many a time they resented us too. They used to say, while you were still in your home, comfortable, we already suffered. Well, it wasn't our fault, but these things, it's not to be believed. That's all I could tell you. All the greenery, everything was, it was like nobody lived there. It's interesting how during the war, I guess the young people were in the army, and somehow it just, almost like it wasn't the same time, it was very interesting. So my aunt and I stayed with that Freddie Schwartz, but he became the mayor of town. It's interesting, about a month ago, his daughter, I used to talk to his daughter, he had a stroke about 10 years ago. And his daughter was telling me, my father always mumbling me in Hungarian, I don't know what he's saying. But I would call him up, and the girl that took care of him put the receiver to his ears, and the girl said he was smiling, so he understood when I was talking to him. So about a month ago, the daughter called me up that he just passed away. He was 95. But when his wife was alive, we were younger, we kept very close, we were close to each other. Whenever we had a chance, we got together. No, I never wanted to go back. And the only thing is my husband and I went back with a tour to Auschwitz. It was a tour that came from Israel called the Cashier Tour. Went back, that was very emotional. Not even to Auschwitz, but a couple of different concentration camps, It was kind of quiet, everything was quiet already, except, I don't know if anybody goes to this veteran cemetery, there's an eternal light, so they have there an eternal light, and there is a prayer for the dead, and that constant, that was very emotional, yes. I never talked about it. It was probably painful, Not only that, but, when I came here, if somebody said, how come you're alive? It's almost like, did I do something wrong? They wouldn't understand that they needed us to work in the factories, And it's almost like you did something wrong, It's interesting. Somebody said, when I came to New York, well, I really, already I started to learn English when I was in Canada, and I went to night school. So you understand, you could speak a little bit if you went someplace, you asked directions. So I said it was interesting because when I asked somebody for directions, they talked very loud to me. When you hear an accent, you talk very loud. I said I wasn't hard of hearing. I wish they would have talked slow instead of loud, But it's interesting when you people, it's hard to understand. And I was always worried that my children shouldn't be embarrassed with me, when I have accent. I went to the school, they had the night for the parent. So all these things I was concerned about. It's interesting because Linda didn't tell me when this happened, but, not everybody knows about what the country Hungary, the little country Hungary. But there was a very famous 10 little gypsy boys that played the violin. They were very famous. They traveled around the world. So Linda had a friend, Carol, and her mother was a piano teacher. And she must have heard about these little gypsy boys. So Carol told everybody that Linda's mother is a Hungarian gypsy. So she didn't tell me that time, after when she was older, she was telling me. So all these things, it was concerned about all these things, When I started to talk, things like I didn't even think of it. It's like somebody was guiding me. It was very interesting, It surprised me too. It taught me how to care about people and how to not to be like that. There was a story about this prisoner was praying and the God watching him. And he said, you pray? Why? He said, well, I'm thanking God that he didn't make me like you. See, this is the thing that you have to think about. That I don't want to be like that. If I think like that, if I am like that, I didn't like people like that, so why should I be like that? I want to be the opposite. And, I have to be thankful. It's not that simple. Until I live, I'm going to still remember my family, and it's painful losing them, But, I'm not like, you see what's going on here. People are unhappy and go hurt innocent people. I don't believe that you should do that. you should be an example for your children, and to explain. Forgiving is like this. I'm going to quote Elie Wiesel. Those should forgive. We're not in position to forgive. And God is the judge. I'm not a judge and a jury. Let God. Eventually, they probably, most of them passed away. And I believe that God is the judgment. I believe that I don't want to hate the new generation of Germans, because it's not their fault, They shouldn't suffer for their parents' sins or their grandparents' sins. I don't believe in that. Well, I would tell the world that they should learn from that and try to find a way. We should all live in peace. Everybody has the right to a good life, and there is plenty, everything for everybody. And you have to remember, love is much stronger than hate.
What do you hope people learn from you and your experiences?
That's what I'm hoping for. For young children, know that education is very important, and to get to know other people and respect each other, no matter what you believe is. Have to have a respect for each other. To try to make peace with everybody. That's the whole thing. To explain to, that nobody wins in a war. There is no winner in a war. Every family loses loved ones. We had a heart, and I always had friends and people staying with us. There was this young couple. He was an officer in the army in Israel, and his wife was a teacher, and she always said, the officers are treated so good. You know how hard it is to be a teacher, to discipline little children. And one day she said, I never told you this, but I'm going to tell you something. All those young boys become like my brothers. He said, if I lose one of them, I have the responsibility to tell their families. He said, when I come to the door, before I even tell them, they already know while I'm there. He said, that's the most painful thing that I have to do. He said, I've been in the war, I was never afraid of dying. He said, but when I have to tell families that they lost a child, he said, that's the most difficult thing. Have hope. You have to have hope, you can't give up hope. I talked to this young man, in the Uber, when they drive me, He was about 50, was born in this country. He never heard of it, he never knew anything about it. He said, I have 2 sons, one is 20, one is 22. He said, I never know about anything like that. That surprises me, because there is a movie also, The Darkest Day, about Mr. Churchill. Yeah. So he talks about it. So there is so many things that happen. And, all those Americans that liberated the camp, like Eisenhower, when they saw what was going on there, so I don't understand why somebody like anybody today already, they don't know about it. But now I see when they teach, I'm surprised that the first time they asked me to speak in the schools, and now that I'm here and they bring, sometimes I had 200-300 children from schools, and sometimes I think maybe you scare the children. I don't know, because like I said, when my children were small, I would never tell them. I wouldn't talk about them, talk about things like that. Many people are not interested, I have a lady there, she was born in this country, she's a 4th-generation Americans, and I was telling something that I'm watching. She said, I'm not interested in anything. I like to go to the ball game, I'm not interested. Maybe you're not interested, you don't care, but you should know about everything, that's how you understand people, that's how you get along, It surprises me when people say, I'm not interested. Or, go America Got Talent. He said, only if my grandchildren or my children are there. Why not be happy for other families too? This surprises me. To understand each other and be kind to each other and try to make peace. This would be the most important thing. And work on, God forbid, of another war. The wars were bad enough, but God forbid of the next, because the nuclear probably would be the worst war. So that's what we have to pray and hope for. And try to tell our leaders, to try to make peace with everybody. It's It's very hard to understand that they don't learn from the past. You know, nobody wins in a war, really. This me, that's my sister and my brother. These are the two cousins that are still alive. That's my mom. She was getting married. See how she dressed, the rabbi's daughter dressed like that. We were there for the wedding. My grandma died in the train going to Auschwitz. These two cousins, the young man, he was put in jail. His parents was in America. He had American citizen paper, and this one went over to Romania, some part that the Nazis didn't touch. And that's my aunt, their mother, and this is my aunt that survived in Budapest. That's my father. This was taken in New York when he went to medical school of my father. And that's my mom. You know, some Jewish women religious wear the wig. But I have a picture of my mom as a young girl. When I came to this country, he had a friend that my mom sent a picture of the young girl, and she find out that I'm here, and she gave me this picture. That's me and my husband. I was young once. That's me when I came to this country. And there's my 3 children. I used to dress them alike. They look like twins, but now one grow a little bit taller. This is my husband and I'm with the 3 grandchildren. That was front of our house when we lived in Teaneck, 707 Courage Place. This is my daughter Linda, with my granddaughter and my son-in-law. And this is Karen and David with their 2 sons, Alex and Jordan. This is Jordan, the married. This is Alex that's going to get married. My husband and I with my son and my daughter-in-law. This was our dining room. See that pretty chandelier? I told my daughter take it off, and they put it up in the house, and they just sold the house to a young couple, and I said just leave the chandelier to them. On Passover, this is our dinette. See they said matzah there and the soup nuts. Then we had the house. I used to make it for 20 people, you know. And you could tell on the dishes, you know, because they use dishes for dairy separate, for meat separate, and Passover you clean everything in the kitchen, and everything is special dishes for that. Isn't that crazy though? A lot of work. But I did it. When we used to go to the doctor, she was always afraid when they got in drugs. So the doctor said, I hope you're going to be like this when you be 20. I was 90. My daughter said, we're going to do something and don't say no. My first cousin and my second cousin lived in Borough Park, and they sent the car service for them. We were in an assistant living to be together. They had one sister that was married, and she survived, you know. There was a city where my uncle was a principal in a Hebrew gymnasium. I don't know if you know that. And the last transport only went up to Vienna. This was the married sister. This is Esther. This is Hannah. This is Bina. We do the best we can, you know. And we're thankful for everything. And you young children, enjoy life, everything. And do the right thing. I know. I used to tell my children, don't mess up your life for one good time.